Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Futures, the podcast for B2B marketers sponsored by AdSact, the B2B ad platform. Today we are exploring one of the biggest strategic questions in modern marketing, which is fit versus intent. Should marketers prioritize reaching companies that are fundamentally aligned with their product, or focus more on buyers showing active intent signals in the market? We have a great panel of guests, each bringing deep experience across digital marketing, growth, ABM, data strategy, and brand building. Before we jump into the conversation, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves and share a short overview of your role and your focus area. So, Corey, would you like to start and give a sentence on yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Corey Kyte, Senior Digital Marketing Manager at Clarity. I manage everything from our paid acquisition on digital channels to ABM to SEO and GEO.
Awesome. Welcome. Elizabeth.
Hi there. I lead growth marketing at Siteimprove, an agentic content intelligence company, and I lead effectively all of our demand gen channels.
Awesome. Welcome. Anish.
Yes, my name is Anish. I am from Synopsys, based in San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm responsible for Martech insights and operations at Synopsys.
Welcome, Anish. And Gary.
My name is Gary Maggiolino. I work for InterSystems in Boston, where I am the Senior Manager of Global Marketing Technology, which means I am the Martech nerd, and I own the Martech stack in marketing operations.
Welcome. And Giorgia. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. I'm Giorgia Favaretto, Illig. I'm based in New York City, and I work for S&P Global, which I think everybody probably knows for the S&P 500. But I'm the global head of marketing for one of the division called Mobility, and we do really automotive intelligence for the automotive industry. And I oversee the full marketing globally, from the Martech stack, to demand gen, to the branding, PR, and so on.
Awesome. Welcome everyone. Great introductions. So let's start with the fundamental question that sets the stage for everything else. What's the real difference between fit-based and intent-based targeting, and which one should marketers rely on more? This is an open question, of course, so feel free to unmute yourselves.
Maybe I'll start, and maybe team can chime in. I think the fit-based approach, where you look at the company's information and demographic information, and that is a fit to the potential customer. So the thinking is fit-based approach is something we prefer internally and across the industry that I have been, because if fit is not there, then even if the intent data is showing that, look, this company is in market, if there is no potential product to market fit and demographic fit is not there, then the challenges would come that, are we going to close that particular company and become our customer? So in my thinking, the fit-based approach always takes precedence over intent-based, but I would love to hear what others are thinking about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, at the end of the day, the fit is who's really you should sell to, and the intent is who's ready now. And if there's an overlap between the two, the intent can show you very little, right? We have in our industry, we're known as a thought leader for all of the forecasting in the automotive. So we get a ton of hits from all analysts across the globe. And that does not mean that those folks, even though they seem to show intent, are the right fit for us, right? So we have to really be careful of how we prioritize the intent if they're not overlapping with our fit. So it's a lot of noise.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Fit for me has always been, that's where you're strategically focused. That's your ICPs. That's where you're targeted, the firmographic makeup of your sales. But I also feel you need those hand raises. You need the people who operationally are in market, are doing active things. But to George's point, it's sometimes becomes very, very difficult to filter out the noise of intent and how it's captured and things like that. You need one over you don't need one. I think you need both is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's a Venn diagram.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to jump on that thinking, I think if the firmographic fit is there, I would love to hear, of course, from Corey and Elizabeth. But my thinking, if firmographic fit is there, you can do outbound marketing and create interest in those accounts. And when I say create interest in those accounts, meaning that is as good as increasing the intent score that they will be willing to look at your solution. So that's where I think firmographic fit is very, very important, as compared to just having intent data showing that significant interest brewing. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I mean, I do think that firmographic fit should be leading most of your targeting, at least at the ground level when you are running these campaigns. I mean, really trying to make sure that you are aligned to your ICP. But I mean, it is the Venn diagram that was kind of mentioned earlier, where I mean, you kind of want to hit this 3 to 5% that's in market that also does align with your fit. I mean, in situations like I'm in currently with my company, we're pretty up market though, and there's only so many accounts that are going to be in market at any time. So I mean, so much of what you're doing from a marketing standpoint at this point is almost planting seeds for the future and trying to make that short list on day one for when they do approach that in market state. So, I mean, I do think product fit is kind of like the bedrock for all the targeting, at least that, I mean, I've done in any B2B capacity over the last decade. But I mean, you do need to still have these like active intent like campaigns running at all times, just to make sure when these accounts do move from stage to stage, you're ready to capitalize on them and give them the right message at the right time.
You guys really hit all of it. It's hard to add to that. I think my favorite way of seeing the overlap between them was grading between fit and intent in sort of not a Venn diagram, but more of a matrix where we would have A to B and then 1 to 4. So we could see for those that are coming in, are we bringing in the right people? I think that's something with intent where if you ignore the intent data that's not tied to your ICP, you're missing some signals that maybe your messaging is off, or maybe you're focusing on the wrong channels. And you can learn a lot about the intent data from maybe what's not working as well. It's just a slightly different layer.
And Elizabeth, when you mentioned grading fit and intent, do you grade both or do you grade only fit? I don't know, your ICP, you have like different grades for your ICP depending on the likelihood.
Yeah, we've done this a few ways. When I was at Gartner, we did a bullseye. So we had the ideal was right in the middle, and then we'd have these other rings where they might be part of the buying group, or maybe they're researching or influencing, and we would grade them differently. And at Market Muse and Siteimprove, we would combine them. So we would previously used Mad Kudu, where it would take all of the deals that had come in and graded them for fit and engagement and buyer readiness, and would then score any leads that came in as very good, medium, and low. And so we would be able to see, based on the combination of those two, which ones we should prioritize. And when we brought that in, it reduced a lot of the friction with our sales team for which ones we prioritize.
Yeah, that's a great point, Elizabeth. Intent's a great way to segment out your lead queues and things like that, people who are in a segment, but what is their true state within a segment? You know, you have people who are marketing qualified leads or sales leads who have been there we were talking prior to this, people have been sitting in these queues for 9 months up to a year when they should be mobilizing out, but they have such low intent that they're just become these static people who are sitting in lead stages.
I know Giorgia mentioned on a Venn diagram. That's great. But let me add one more circle to the Venn diagram, what I would call trifecta. You have firmographic fit, you have intent score, and the third circle would be, are they active on your website? Right? If you see those accounts active on your website through various technologies that we use, like reverse IP, then that's a very solid combination. You have ICP, and they are active on your website, meaning they're already aware of your brand. They're already researching product. Just nail it. So I think those trifecta would go further because now you're looking at the companies that are active on your website.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't mean to jump ahead with Joaquin's schedule here, but I mean, in the next section, when we are talking about like intent and where does it fall short, I mean, I think that you kind of nailed it on the head. I mean, I think where intent is great is when you do have these first party signals. And I mean, you can gather that from, high value pages being viewed on your website by certain users from target accounts. Maybe you have some G2 activity, or you have really trusted campaigns that you're seeing through paid search that usually brings highly qualified, high intent individuals to your site. Those are great signals. I do think where there ends up being more noise is when you start roping in these third-party intent signals and you don't set thresholds either high enough or accurately enough. I mean, I've used a handful of different ABM platforms I'm sure we're all familiar with over the last few years. And I mean, if you don't have them instrumented correctly, you could be generating a ton of search traffic or aligning a lot of search traffic to terms that are really vague, ambiguous, and kind of giving like you and your sales teams a lot of false positives, essentially. And I mean, then at that point, it's bogging them down. You're spending a lot of extra money on the marketing side trying to acquire people that might not even be in market.
Or to your point, Corey, there, especially if you're doing categorical intent, we're in data management, integration, and analytics, three of the most generic, widespread categories there are. So fine-tuning those are absolutely critical.
And I think Gary mentioned at the beginning ICP, and having the ICP list of companies that we can go after is very important. I've seen many organizations struggle with it. Like you go and ask, hey, do you have ICP profile and do you have ICP list of companies we want to go and target? Do we have a list? And many times this list doesn't exist, so you don't know. And that's where potentially, the challenges will break out because you don't know whom to target. So it's very important that collectively as a team, we work with sales organization and have a list of companies we want to go after. Ask them, which are the prospect you think we can go after, and if they become our customer, we are successful.
Do everyone agree with that? Is sales the one who should give us, I'm talking give marketing, a list of accounts that you should go after, or is the other way around? I don't know. Tell me about your experience, how you identify high fit accounts.
I think it's both, right? Like at the end of the day, you have to listen to sales. They're on the ground way more than us. Like if we are so far removed for most of the time. And it's a combination of both because they also don't see some of the signal and they can be blind to other things that we might have more view of, right? But at the end of the day, it's also like a problem, right? Fit, because you might still make assumption through some of the signal that yes, these people are on the side, they're reading the things, they are interesting, but is there really a problem? Like for me, we have in some part of our business, a very finite number of potential customer with manufacturers of cars, right? There's really only a certain finite number of manufacturers. It's not an infinite number. And we know we can't always assume that there's really a problem for these 20 to 25 major enterprise customer. So, but there's like obvious moments where they're really not only searching, but there's crises going on. So you gotta meet them into a various level of problems that they might have, knowing they are signaling against some of our competitors in certain part of the market, that they are like starting to take a kind of a sit back. And then sales, I mean, there's just so many different points. And sales, I feel like if it's not involved and they're not providing their voices and what they hear, they're not going to be bought in no matter what you send them. So you kind of have to listen to them and overlay it.
I do think there needs to be a shared methodology for how, if you don't have a targeted select group like that to go after. There was one sales rep that I had when he gave me his list that he was going after. I asked him about a couple of them, and his response was, they'd be cool logos to have. And that's not...
That to be a better reason than that.
Yeah. We all have them.
They actually weren't a good fit for us. They didn't have content. We were a content strategy company, and they were too. Actually, their content wouldn't have been a good fit for us. So I do think there has to be a shared methodology and shared understanding for how those accounts are identified.
We have right now, when we're looking at intent, we have, and I think Elizabeth, it was you who mentioned tiering before. We have 3 tiers. We have 1 is a sales target, 2 is a marketing target, and 3 is an organic intent target. Somebody who's come in that wasn't on our radar, but is showing strong signals enough that we're going to evaluate them and kind of possibly move them into one of the 2 buckets. And the other thing too regarding intent is, what I like to call inside or outside. We have our signals that we are looking for that match our product, that match our brand, that match some of our strategic positioning. But then there's, to your point, Elizabeth, understanding or Georgia, understanding the challenges of the market and the challenges of these organizations. We also need to have intent signals that match companies that are having these problems that we're a perfect fit to solve.
I'm curious if you guys use intent for your customer base as well. Because I found that for G2, especially Corey, you mentioned G2, we didn't have something in place when we saw that our customers were looking at our account on G2 if they didn't leave a review, or they were looking at our competitors. And I would send those over to CS and be like, how we doing? How we doing with this account? Are we good? Should we reach out maybe? I'm curious if that's for expansion purposes, what you guys do there.
We started instrumenting a lot of that last year, at least using 6sense to see where I do have some trust in their third-party signals is when you do get to very specific branded searches. So if I have a list of all of our peer-to-peer competitors, like the people that we do lose deals to or we're very often in deals with, that's where I can really trust that data if X, Y, and Z customer of ours is searching multiple times for one of our biggest competitors, and we're able to sync that into our CRM so that our CSMs know, hey, they're looking at our competitors and they have a renewal coming up in the next 8 to 12 months. We need to make sure we kind of understand what their problems are. Are they happy with us? And actually able to help out that motion as well, not just inbound.
Ditto. That's exactly what I was going to say.
What I would say, my thinking here, folks, this is Anish again, is when you go and develop your ICP list, you need in your framework bottom-up approach, meaning look at historical closed ones and looking at their attributes is what I would call bottom up, and top down, where top down comes from sales working with. I think both are important, and the magic silver bullet is somewhere in between, but you need to have both bottom up and top down approach in order to come up with a ICP list of companies you can go after.
100%. And Corey, just one small question. How much granularity can you get from platforms, from intent platforms like 6sense? Can you see you have someone from X company searching for this term and you can get to exactly to the person, or you get to someone at this company is doing this?
It's much closer to the latter, where you know that it's somebody from this company. I think that we're moving in a direction where at some point we'll probably have contact level intent that's really dialed in. I mean, I know that there are a couple of solutions out there right now that are working on that, early stages, becoming more common. I don't have a ton of exposure to them, unfortunately, but yeah, at least right now, it's really just this account is searching for these branded companies, which I would like to think, at least within our area of the world, if somebody is looking for those competing solutions of ours, they're probably in the right job titles. I can't imagine somebody that's a sales director would be looking up one of our competitors. So we kind of take it at face value as, hey, that's probably one of our core job titles that we work with.
And how do you evaluate the accuracy and the source of intent signals so you can rely on, well, this is someone from actually this company that really trusts this information or not?
So that's another great question. I'm usually really skeptical about all this third-party search activity because so much of it is very fuzzy. Where I do start to kind of give it a really high degree of fidelity, though, is on very niche searches or something that could be brand applicable. I know with SaaS solutions, the spellings and the branded names are going to be very unique. It's not something that's going to be interchangeable with just an accidental search or something of that nature. So typically I can trust them. Where it does enter more of a gray area is if you get more vague or more educational focus. So I really try to dial in just on specific brands so that we are signaling to the right folks that, hey, they might be shopping around or at least visiting other websites from competitors.
Is everyone bringing intent data into their CRM, or are they holding it externally? Right now, we are keeping it kind of bottled within. We use HubSpot as our primary marketing automation system. So we're keeping the intent signal data primarily in HubSpot. And then if it reaches a level where we think it's truly going to be sales motivating, then we're going to push some data points over to the CRM, because there's so much, to everyone's point, there's so much noise, there's so much clutter, it would almost lose its efficacy if we just started dumping data against sales records and org records and things like that.
We have moved very much towards trying to set up orchestrations for specific intent motions. So, I mean, literally what we're talking about with customers and trying to prevent churn, see if they're looking at any competing solutions of ours, that was one of our first orchestrations that we set up from intent platform to CRM so that CSMs were able to see that kind of just in like a single pane. But I totally agree with what you're saying about like, if you put everything on there from an intent standpoint, it's like, hey, what's actually important to look at? But yeah.
And I strangely find that sales, to me, intent data should be pretty intuitive. So I'm having a hard time explaining why to sales why and how to read it. But I don't know if you found it, but I find that it's not intuitive for most salespeople to understand, like, what does this mean? Like, they're very straightforward, black and white sort of mindset. So they can read through the lines. If this person have visited, it's like if you show some intent data in a way that is not very direct, I find it for them to be complete noise, even when it's obvious.
And just to clarify, are we talking here about third-party intent data, not first-party intent data, I believe, right? Because first-party intent data, by definition, I believe you store that into your CRM, or am I wrong?
Well, it's the first party is kind of usually it's connected to a CRM-based activity, something that is brought over. Third party is to Corey and Elizabeth and others' points, is more generic, and there needs to be some analysis that goes along with it rather than just saying, okay, we know that Corey did this thing, was on our website, looked at this, completed this form, requested this demo. Okay, that's a major hand raise. Get it over.
And I mean, a lot of platforms natively have really good first party intent tracking just baked into it, like HubSpot. Gary, I mean, I'm sure you guys look at the activity section, and a lot of times, like, even though we have all these different attribution tools and intent tools to give us good visibility into what people are doing, HubSpot, I feel like at the end of the day, has really given us probably the easiest line of sight into like, hey, what has this person been doing on our website? What forms have they filled out? What key pages have they been looking at and interacting with? So a lot of times that first party intent is either in a CRM somewhere, but like it's almost a separate component, at least for how we've instrumented it, but still very valuable stuff.
Same here.
I think we've integrated it, but we don't put it all in front of the reps, because I think from a marketing perspective, understanding how that fits in with their journey is important to us, so we can see, are they looking at G2 and where does that fit with when they communicated with us? So it's more like that higher level view versus when it's acted on. I think those are kind of two different elements.
Yeah. And is it categorical intent or is it product level intent? You know, you have on some of these platforms where it's like, okay, you had somebody who searched integration. Well, that could be any, and that, you know, you could get 100 of those a day, but not a single one had anything to do with you as an organization or even a fit product or any other way.
Yeah, Gary. So on that point, I think product intent is very important. But I think more than that, the brand intent is very important in my eyes, what I've seen, because if they're, doing research on your company's name or competitor's name, that's a very solid information, because, they are at least aware of it and they're doing research on the name of your company X or company Y.
And then what do you do with this information? Let's say you capture third-party intent with a provider with 6 Sense, you captured the data, you decided to put it in your CRM. What do you do with it? Do you run ads to them, top of the funnel ads? Do you try to convert them? Do you call sales and you say, hey, these guys are actively searching for this, you should, I don't know, tell me how you split demand creation and demand capture based on the data that you're capturing from intent-based providers.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least for us, we have certain thresholds too. So, somebody needs to search for a certain term or a certain set of terms over 5 times in like 30 days or something for us to kind of trust that third-party intent signal a little bit more. But once it does cross that threshold, that's where SDRs are being notified of a certain account having more activity, search activity that's relevant to whatever the specific product feature is, or maybe it's a branded search, a competitor search, something that we're tracking. So SDRs can be doing some engagement that triggers a lot of workflows on our part for emails, different ad activities, so that they programmatically land themselves into a new campaign once they do exceed a certain level of search intent for different third-party signals. More times than not, we're putting more equity into the first-party intent signals. So, I mean, if this account has actually visited the website and we know that they've been visiting certain pages, they're absolutely being remarketed to. Reps are being alerted of those as well. But yeah, I think that's really the key to using this stuff intelligently, is making sure that like system to system are talking when these thresholds are exceeded. And you can tell that these different accounts are displaying the kind of activity that you're wanting them to.
Ditto.
One thing, of course, is giving leads to your sales team. But what about like start nurturing these leads as almost if they were new. If they are showing some level of intent, third-party intent, then you bring them like at the very top of the funnel and you start nurturing, and then you give them to leads. Is that something that any of you are doing? Or if they show intent immediately, and of course, certain level of intent, you give them to sales? Curious about that demand creation piece.
Yeah. It's and this actually speaks to something Elizabeth said before in terms of a matrix and a scoring. We're really starting to reimagine what we're doing with intent right now. So I've got a lot of stuff going on in Sandbox in our environments, and the biggest thing for us is understanding what level of intent is it. You have a matrix, high fit, high intent. Well, we want to convert those. Those are people who have hand raised motions, and we want to get those into a more hands-on process and workflow. But everyone else, I think it's understanding based on the level intent, where the intent came from. To Corey's point, the number of signals is critical. If it's a single signal, they came to our website, they came and left. Well, I drove by a billboard and I turned my head. To me, that's the same type of thing. But if they've come multiple times, then maybe we want to get them into some form of a nurture if their lead score is low or they don't have a high fit or something like that. So it kind of depends on what your structure is and what your marketing workflows look like and nurture process and things like that.
And what about that's what you do with intent-based targeting, and what about fit-based targeting? People who are not showing intent at all, accounts that have zero engagement. Do you and your organizations go after them and try to warm up these accounts? And how big do you think is the market in terms of people who are not even aware of your solution or your category versus the ones that are showing intent? Some people say 95%, 5%. I don't know. How big are those that are fundamentally a good fit and you should go after?
I mean, we were talking about this before the podcast, actually, where this is kind of an evergreen issue, especially when you're working for a company that's going to be more upmarket and you deal with longer sales cycles, because then at that point, the percentage of accounts that are actually in market, I think, goes down more and more. And they actually enter the market less frequently than down market smaller accounts do. So, I mean, a lot of what we're doing today on our end is aligning on a named account strategy and making sure that we are marketing to all these accounts, some of them more than others, just depending on priority that we have internally, but making sure that we're in a good position to make a day one shortlist. Like, that's a big priority of mine, just because, I mean, that's going to go a long way for making sure when those 3 to 5% of accounts that are in market at any given time, like, you're at least going to have a seat at the table and you're not going to be scrambling last second when they do approach like a buying cycle and they're looking for solutions, because your success rates of actually getting a seat at the table at that point, I feel like, just diminish over time if you're not actively marketing to these priority accounts when they're out of buying cycles, at least from my standpoint.
It's harder to justify ROI for some of that stuff, though. And they're like, well, why are we, we're doing all this stuff. What are we getting out of it? And it's those are the ones that kind of you're like, oh, but the fit is spot on. The ICP is spot on. They're in, they're kind of straight shot. It's just a matter of getting engagement. And to Corey's point, are they actually in market right now? So you're positioning for when they potentially are. And that never goes away, especially, we're a B2B company who's in technology infrastructure and data. So, how many times is a company going to, change out their database? But you have to be there and be on that list of companies they need to talk to when they are.
Yeah,
or if they're scaling.
Never know. I mean, it's happening to us today. You also never know when they are very unhappy and there's a problem with the competitors. Like said this before to Joaquin, like over the years, I've noticed like a very distinct trend on some of the spend that I've done at a, let's call it brand level or more generic level. So once it's almost a predictable curve. Once you actually start to lower down the spend, the more generic top of funnel branding spend, inevitably, I don't know, let's call it 3 months later or whatever timeline, also the leads and the quality of the MQL just goes down. So there's just like this overlap. So it just like, it has to be a steady continuum. Maybe it's the 30% versus the 70% of your budget. But once you lower that, because what are we doing it for? And what's like the coverage, then inevitably you pay for it like 3 to 6 months later. And you can show it, right? Because you have had moments where that happened, and a graph is super powerful to show the why.
I think what we do typically, we look at any company and if we see the first party data, that's our lowest hanging fruit. We look at the list of first party data, the company showing up for the first time on our radar. And if there is an ISP list and it belongs to the list, game on. That is where we start. Right. We do not look at intent data at all. If those two things are matched, we go after it because the company is aware of our solution. They are already part of the ICP list, and intent data becomes secondary data at that point in time for us.
Absolutely. And that's where that first party intent really is valuable, just in balancing out the strategy. I mean, in Giorgia, kind of like you were saying, that like 70-30 potentially of like how much brand spend do you have just like running air cover to these accounts versus just like everything else that like is actually going to show up on an ROI within a year. I mean, Gary, kind of like you were mentioning, I mean, that's really like the balance that you're trying to maintain throughout the entire year, I think, is making sure that you are staying top of mind for these accounts. But I mean, Anish, just like you were saying, once they do show some first party intent, where that's them finding your website through X, Y, and Z medium, or you just going out there and trying to capture that intent through like a paid search, like that's really where I think you can help balance out the strategy and make sure that you're sort of satisfying both ends of like capturing the people that are in market and also making sure you're ready for when those accounts that aren't in market enter that stage eventually.
Yeah, it's like if you always just chase the intent, you're always like going to be late to the deal because you never know.
There's a lot of noise just in the pure intent data as well. I think there's significant noise than the signal. If I were to put number, maybe 5% signal, 95% noise. So if you have a good quality first party data and they're showing engagement and they're part of the ICP list, go for it. You may not have leads at those accounts, then you can always do paid search. You can always do LinkedIn paid ads for that particular account, showing up with certain titles that you are interested in and see if they would convert. Then of course you have SDR motion as well. SDRs can do outbound calls and try to reach those folks with relevant titles in order to move the needle.
Yeah, I think, Anish, I would love to run a short experiment here and see what are your favorite tools for demand creation and demand capture. Anish, you mentioned LinkedIn. I don't know. What's your favorite tool for demand creation and the one for demand capture? Same question to everyone.
I mean, I do like paid search, to be honest, but, the volume is lower. And, if someone is showing intent because they're searching for things and clicking an ad and converting, but I'm not sure what is the efficacy as we move forward into ChatGPT and Gemini of the world, because most of the people are not going to search those blue links. So things are very exciting. Many things are going to evolve over time. I think this whole space, digital marketing space, is about to unfreeze. With ChatGPT kind of solution, things are going to change in the next year or two.
What about the rest?
I mean, I usually fall on the paid search side just because, that's how I got my foot into digital marketing about a decade ago and that's really when Google Ads, I feel like, was more effective and it was a lot easier. Over time, I think it's gotten more difficult just with like targeting options going away, more automated strategies. That's also helped ROI in a lot of ways. But as far as like where things are going with search, I think like everything you said is pretty valid, just with LLMs kind of cannibalizing some of that market share and people just searching differently. I know from managing and owning really our entire SEO and GEO strategy, what's becoming of that. that we're having to change everything that we used to be doing from an SEO standpoint. Those plays don't really work as well as they used to. So we really need to kind of adapt. And I mean, people are searching less in general. So we're losing a lot of that traffic we once had. And we're really having to optimize more for leads and less traffic, which is good long term. It's just like a harder conversation to have, I think, at higher levels. That like, hey, we're losing traffic, but leads are going up or leads are staying the same. And that's really because search activity, people are doing more searches when they do go on a ChatGPT, for example. They're having like a full-fledged conversation, potentially evaluating different solutions, and they're way more educated when they eventually hit your website. So, I mean, I'm just kind of rambling about search at this point. Search is one of my favorite options. I mean, purely for ABM, though, it's probably LinkedIn ads. So, yeah.
But that's so interesting. Actually I've had a very different experience because I'm actually agreeing with you on the search. I don't know that I love LinkedIn ads for results. I actually find that when I compare the two, LinkedIn loses every time to search in terms of ad spend. Not organic, not like thought leadership, being there, relentless, playing with the algorithm of LinkedIn to be sure that you pop up. I find that that's way more useful, although that's not a spend. It's just a different type of spend. You have to spend the people time and the thought leadership time, etc. But I actually find that LinkedIn ads are the least return every time compared to search, at least so far.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty fair statement. There's a lot of reasons that does happen, I think, from company to company. I mean, paid search, if it's instrumented correctly on Google Ads, like you're going after really high intent folks that are ready to convert, whether that's on branded terms, long tail, non-branded terms. And you're really going after that 3 to 5% that's in market at any given time. They might not have the greatest fit. That side's variable. But the big difficulty with paid search is you can't do account level targeting, at least not as effectively as you can on LinkedIn. And that's where it's just a hard balance of like, hey, you have the account level targeting on one side, but you don't have it on the other.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely fair. It just like at the end of the day, the math doesn't add up.
So Giorgia, how do you compare? What is the basis? What is the framework do you use in saying the search works better for you as compared to paid social or paid LinkedIn? If I may.
At the end, it just in a very simplistic way, like, the amount of dollars spent and the return in terms of quality leads with search, it's always cheaper and have a higher quality leads than the spend and the high quality leads from LinkedIn.
So you looks like your cost per lead is the metric that you use.
Cost per lead, but also like quantity of quality leads. Like, for me, at least, this is like the third companies that I'm trying to compare it as much as possible apple to apple. And at the end of the day, LinkedIn is so expensive and the amount of quality leads I get is so little in comparison to search.
So I use different metric to compare. I don't use cost per lead. We look at whether we are going to do any business with that particular person. And if we think we create an opportunity and we can add that person on a contact role and eventually we will win that opportunity, then we are willing to pay even $10,000 because the average deal size is significantly more than that. So cost per lead is not a criteria, to be honest, just because if the leads are going to convert into becoming a customer, people are willing to pay 5 times as well.
I completely agree with you, and I should have take it a step further. Obviously, it is about real pipeline and close one for sure. And I'm not advocating not to do LinkedIn at all. Like, I just do think that often I tend to try to end up spending a little bit less dollars on LinkedIn and focusing more on the organic. I think you have to be there and you have to do it right. I'm not saying one like in place of the other, but at the end of the day, like from a cost to lead perspective, but also from a good quality quantity and then return on investment overall, inclusive of close one, the scale goes higher on search still than LinkedIn.
Yeah, but also that depends, I believe, on how much education you need to give to your buyers. If they don't know you, if they don't know the terms that they should go and search on Google, probably they will never do. So yeah, I don't know, Giorgia, if you ever switched off LinkedIn and you got like any kind of different results than Google, or maybe that's because people are already aware of your solutions and they can just go and search for
Yeah, in all honesty, I never ever turned off LinkedIn. Like it's not about that to me. I think what I'm saying here is like LinkedIn is amazing and the right thing, but I actually rather spend more time on LinkedIn with quality content and then do ads than the other way around. Like I'm not investing on LinkedIn primarily because of the dollars against the ads. I'm investing on LinkedIn more as a halo effect on the thought leadership and the invest. So to me, that's the balance. So it's not about turning off LinkedIn. It's like a different use in my mind.
It's channel management. That's all.
It's channel management. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining this conversation and for sharing such a clear and practical insights. This has been great conversation. And for our audience, if you enjoyed the discussion, feel free to share it with colleagues and connect with our speakers. And until next time, thank you so much.